Christmas with the family? Please don't come. I answered only 2 words. Enjoy it. What they didn't know was that I'd been quietly holding an $8 million fortune of my own. When their holiday photos began popping up on social media, my phone lit up with 53 calls and messages. I sipped my morning coffee, watching snow drift past the window when the first buzz came. A message from Anthony. My heart still gave that tiny jump it always did, even after years of disappointments. I read his text 3 times before the meaning landed. Don't come. After months of planning, buying gifts, and picturing my grandchildren's faces as they opened their presents, I was suddenly erased from the day I loved most. 28? Christmas mornings I'd spent rising at dawn to roast a turkey and set the table with my grandmother's china. And now it ended with a few blunt words on a screen. I looked around my little apartment at the decorations I'd hung weeks ago. The small tree trimmed with handmade ornaments, the stockings with every family member's name. Even Jessica's, though she'd never thanked me for anything. I thought of last year when she rolled her eyes at my old photo albums and whispered to Anthony about me, living in the past. Even my grandkids barely glanced up from their phones. Still, I kept trying. The hardest part wasn't being left out. It was the casual cruelty, as if decades of sacrifice, raising Anthony alone, working 2 jobs after his father died, had never mattered. In a bottom drawer, I found a wooden box of letters, Anthony's notes from college, thanking me for care packages and for always believing in him. A letter from the day Emma was born, calling me the best grandmother he could imagine. When did I become a burden instead of a blessing? Perhaps when Anthony married Jessica, whose wealthy family made my homemade gifts and tiny apartment seem small. The phone rang again. Hope flickered, maybe Anthony calling to apologize. Instead, it was my neighbor Margaret from the penthouse upstairs. Ann, Charles and I would love you to join our Christmas dinner tomorrow. No fuss, we're having it catered by Le Bernardin. Please say yes. I hesitated, then agreed. After all, Margaret and Charles had never once made me feel less than. When I hung up, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, a 65-year-old woman with silvered hair and department store clothes. I smiled anyway. Maybe this Christmas would hold a different kind of magic, one my family would never see coming. Then I remembered Anthony's text, so casual, as if I were someone who could be erased whenever it suited them. Maybe it was time to stop shrinking myself for people who never valued what I brought to their lives. I opened the closet and pulled out the black dress I'd bought for Anthony's wedding and never worn again. It still fit, almost perfectly. My mother's pearl necklace, my one elegant heirloom, would be the finishing touch. As I hung the dress on the door, my phone buzzed. A new message from my daughter-in-law. Thanks for understanding. The kids are excited for a quiet Christmas with just us. I deleted it without a word. Tomorrow, while they enjoyed their peaceful holiday, I'd be dining with people who actually wanted me there. For the first time all day, I smiled. The next morning, I woke with a surprising sense of clarity. Maybe it was the finality of Anthony's rejection, or maybe it was the thought of spending Christmas where I truly belonged. I brewed my coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. For the first time in months, I logged into my private investment account, the one Anthony knew nothing about. The balance blinked back at me. $8,247,332.18. The number I'd been quietly guarding since my Aunt Helen passed. She'd never married, made a fortune in early tech stocks, and left everything to me because, as she wrote, "You're the only one who knows the value of hard work." I'd kept it secret so Anthony could stand on his own, believing that if he knew, he'd only see me as a wallet. How wrong I'd been. He didn't respect me anyway. I thought of all the little loans he'd never repaid. The sighs when I couldn't splurge on Disney trips. The homemade gifts that paled beside the expensive presents from Jessica's mother, Patricia, the grandmother who bought cars and funded European vacations. While I quietly helped with school fees, Patricia held the spotlight. I let it happen, thinking humility was the lesson. But what had I really taught them? That my love and sacrifice could be brushed aside. I closed the laptop and reached for something bolder, a red silk designer dress hidden in the back of my closet. I'd bought it years ago for some special occasion that never came until now. It fit like a promise. The color lit up my brown eyes and made my silver hair look striking. I looked like someone with stories and power. The day moved slowly, but I took my time. Hair set, nails painted, makeup precise. At 5:30, I slipped into the dress in my mother's pearls. The woman in the mirror looked like she belonged in penthouses and private clubs. To my surprise, I realized that's exactly who I was. At 6 o'clock sharp, I knocked on Margaret and Charles's door. Charles opened it in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his eyes widening. "Anne, you look incredible," he said, guiding me inside. Their penthouse soared over Central Park, sparkling with crystal chandeliers and museum-worthy art. Guests I'd only ever read about turned to greet me. "Everyone, meet our dear friend Anne," Margaret announced warmly, handing me a glass of champagne. "She's the wonderful neighbor I've told you so much about." The evening felt like stepping into a film. I discussed literacy programs with philanthropist Eleanor Astor, debated art with a museum curator, and even traded ideas on economic policy with a former hedge fund manager. They treated me as an equal, and for the first time in years, I truly felt like one. "You know," Eleanor said over dinner, "we're looking for new board members for the foundation. You have such insight into what really matters for working families. Would you consider it?" I almost laughed at the thought, but she was completely serious. "I'd be honored to consider it," I told Eleanor, and I meant it. It was well past midnight when I finally stepped back into my apartment. I slipped off my heels, poured a glass of wine, and let the glow of the evening wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt completely alive. My phone stayed silent. No cheerful Christmas texts from Anthony. No quick calls from the grandchildren asking for help or dessert. They were enjoying their peaceful holiday without me, and clearly, without a second thought. But for once, I didn't miss them either. I opened my laptop and glanced again at the balance in my private account. $8,247,332.18. Enough to live any life I chose. Enough to never again beg for scraps of affection from people who couldn't see my worth. I thought about Patricia buying her way into my grandchildren's hearts. Jessica's quiet jabs about my small apartment and thrift store treasures. Anthony's unspoken belief that I'd always be there, grateful for whatever crumbs of attention he tossed my way. They had no idea who I really was. They'd never cared to find out. Maybe it was time to show them. The week after Christmas, I did something I'd never done in my 65 years. I walked into Tiffany & Company and bought myself a Cartier watch, because I could. Not for the time, but for the thrill of choosing something exquisite just for me. The sales associate's attitude shifted the moment I handed over my black AME-X. Suddenly, I wasn't just another older woman browsing. I was a valued client, offered champagne and a private consultation. I left with the watch and a diamond tennis bracelet that sparkled like new beginnings. That was only the start. By mid-January, I'd hired a personal shopper, a decorator, and a real estate agent. If my family wanted to treat me as invisible, fine. But I was finished living as if I were. The new apartment I bought was everything my old one wasn't. 2 bedrooms, marble counters, a breathtaking view. It was in the same building as Margaret and Charles, 3 floors above the place where my son hadn't visited me in 5 years. "Are you sure about this?" Margaret asked as we chose furniture. I was. Absolutely. My transformation wasn't just about wealth. I hired a personal trainer who came 3 times a week. A stylist taught me how to dress for the life I was stepping into. A private chef cooked twice a week, not because I couldn't cook, but because I no longer wanted to be the one always serving. Within 2 months, I was almost unrecognizable. Not just leaner or more poised, but stronger inside. I moved through the world like someone who had every right to take up space. Eleanor Astor had meant it about the board position. The Astor Foundation for Educational Excellence met twice a month in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the Hudson. I sat at a mahogany table beside people whose names appeared in Forbes, discussing million-dollar grants as casually as grocery lists. "Anne brings a vital perspective," Eleanor told the group during my 3rd meeting. "She understands what it means to balance bills with a child's future." And they listened, truly listened. Not the polite half-attention I'd grown used to from my family, but real interest. When I proposed funding after-school programs in working-class neighborhoods, the room lit up with discussion. By the end of the meeting, we'd committed $2 million to the idea. $2 million, once unimaginable, now set aside to change lives. My calendar filled with gallery openings, charity galas, and private dinners in historic townhouses. I was photographed at a museum fundraiser next to a tech billionaire and his wife. The caption read, "Anne Morrison, philanthropist and foundation board member, discusses literacy initiatives with fellow donors." Philanthropist? I'd become someone worthy of a title. What surprised me most wasn't the luxury, though waking in silk sheets still felt like a dream. It was the respect, the way people sought my opinion, the quiet certainty that I belonged. This was who I'd always been, finally free to stand tall. Soon I was traveling too. A long weekend in Nepal with Margaret and Charles, staying at a resort where the cheapest room cost more than I once spent on groceries in 3 months. And I knew, without a single doubt, that I'd never make myself small again. A week in Paris with Eleanor felt like stepping into another life. The hotel staff remembered my coffee order each morning, and the sheets had a thread count higher than the rent on my old apartment. Every moment was like waking from a long sleep. In Paris, I bought clothes that made me feel radiant. In Napa, I learned wine from a sommelier who treated my palate as if it truly mattered. I was uncovering parts of myself I'd never met before. By March, the photos began to surface online. Not ones I posted, but snapshots my new friends shared. Anne at a charity auction, bidding on a painting. Anne at a wine tasting, laughing with the daughter of a real estate mogul. Anne at a private dinner, seated between a celebrated novelist and a prominent judge. In every image, I looked like someone who belonged. Someone with a story worth hearing. I didn't think about Anthony seeing them. I was too busy living to wonder who might be watching from the sidelines. But he was watching. They all were. The first sign came in April, a text from Jessica. "Mom Morrison, hope you're doing well. The kids were asking about you." I read it twice, surprised by the sudden warmth. Mom Morrison, she'd never called me that before. Usually it was just Anne, or nothing at all. I didn't respond. I had a benefit dinner that night where I was being honored for my work with the Education Foundation. The gown I wore cost more than I used to spend on Christmas gifts for the entire family, and it was worth every penny. I looked like someone who never had to beg for a place at anyone's table. 2 days later, another message arrived. "Emma's spring concert is next week. She'd love to see you there." Interesting. Just months earlier, I'd been told her concerts were for immediate family only. Now suddenly I was welcome. I showed the text to Eleanor over lunch at the Metropolitan Club. She raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like someone's been doing their research." "How long since you've heard from them?" "Christmas Eve," I said, "when they uninvited me from dinner." Eleanor's expression hardened. "And now they want you back." Convenient. That evening, my doorman called up. "Mrs. Morrison, a delivery for you." A towering arrangement of white roses and lilies, easily a few $100s. The card read, "Thinking of you, Mom. Love, Anthony, Jessica, Emma, and Jake." 6 months of silence, and now flowers. Now invitations. Now Mom Morrison instead of plain Anne. Something had shifted. I walked to my laptop and typed my own name into Google for the first time. The results made me laugh out loud. There I was, photo after photo, society pages, charity websites, foundation newsletters. Anne Morrison at a gala. Anne Morrison at a fundraiser. Anne Morrison, donor and honored guest. They hadn't missed me. They hadn't suddenly realized they'd hurt me. They'd realized they'd overlooked my bank account. The calls started at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday in late April. I was halfway through a training session with Marcus when the first one came. Anthony's name lit the screen. I let it go to voicemail. "Need a break, Mrs. Morrison?" Marcus asked. "No," I said. "Whoever it is can wait." By the time I finished my workout, showered, and sat down for breakfast, I had 17 missed calls, all from Anthony. Whatever had sparked this urgency wasn't good news for him. I poured my coffee and pressed play on the first voicemail while gazing at the city skyline outside my window, a city I'd lived in for decades, but now from a far different vantage. "Mom, it's Anthony. I really need to talk to you. Please call me back as soon as you can. It's important." His voice carried an edge I hadn't heard since his teenage years, nervous, almost pleading. The next message came quickly. "Mom, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I need to reach you. Please call me back." By the fifth voicemail, the desperation was unmistakable. "Mom, I saw the photos online from the charity events. We need to talk. Please, just call me." So that was it. He'd finally connected the dots. The mother he'd cast aside 6 months ago was now appearing in society pages, seated at galas, wearing gowns worth more than his mortgage. I set the phone aside and opened my laptop, calm and unhurried. For once, the urgency was all on his side. Yesterday, new photos from the Literacy Foundation's spring benefit appeared online. There I was at the head table, seated beside the mayor's wife and a prominent tech entrepreneur. The photographer caught me mid-laugh at something Eleanor said, perfectly at ease in a world of influence and wealth. The caption read, "Anne Morrison, major foundation donor and board member, enjoys the evening's festivities." Major donor. That was new, yet accurate. I'd written a check for $50,000 that night, a small ripple in my investment account, but enough to launch 3 new after-school programs. The phone rang again. This time I answered. "Hello, Anthony." "Mom." Relief poured through his voice, like he'd been holding his breath. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you all morning." "I was busy," I said evenly. "What do you need?" My directness seemed to stun him. I'd never been this blunt with Anthony before. I'd always been the mother who dropped everything when he called. "We need to talk. Can I come over?" "I'm not at the old apartment anymore." Silence. "What do you mean?" "I moved. I live in the penthouse now. Same building, different life." Another pause. Longer this time. "The penthouse? Mom? Those places cost—" "I know what they cost." I could almost hear him trying to process it. The mother who once clipped coupons and apologized for simple Christmas gifts now lived among chandeliers and marble floors. "Can I come up?" I checked my calendar. Lunch with Margaret at 1, a foundation meeting at 3, dinner with donors at 7. My days were full now, filled with people who valued my time. "I have 30 minutes at 11. When Anthony arrived, I barely recognized him. Handsome as ever, but worn down. His expensive suit, no doubt Jessica's choice, looked rumpled. Dark circles framed his eyes. He stepped into the foyer, staring at the marble, the crystal chandelier, the art chosen with my decorator. His mouth fell open as if he'd stepped into someone else's life. In a way, he had. "This is incredible," he said at last. When did you— Would you like coffee?" "My housekeeper made a fresh pot this morning." "You have a housekeeper." I led him to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view. He sank into a leather chair, still scanning the room. "Mom, I don't understand. Last Christmas, you were in that tiny apartment, and now—" "Now," I said calmly, "I'm living the life I can afford." "But where did the money come from?" I sat across from him, perfectly composed, in a tailored jacket and silk blouse, clothes of a woman who belonged in boardrooms and charity galas. "It was always there, Anthony. You just never asked." His face went pale. "What do you mean, always there?" "I inherited it 3 years ago, from your great-aunt Helen." "Aunt Helen left you money?" $8 million. The number landed like a physical blow. He actually recoiled, a hand to his chest as if the air had changed. 8 million. Mom, why didn't you tell me?" I took a slow sip of coffee and let the question hang. "Tell you what, exactly? That I had money you could borrow? That I could solve every problem with my checkbook?" "No, that's not— He stumbled, the power balance so altered he didn't know how to speak to me. "You mean like Patricia does for you and Jessica?" I asked. His face flushed. "That's different." "How is it different?" She wants to help," she offers. "And I didn't want to help?" I didn't mean it like that, but he had meant it, and we both knew. To him, Patricia's wealth commanded respect. Mine had always been something to manage, to minimize. My phone chimed with a text from Margaret, confirming our lunch at the exclusive club. In 2 hours, I'd be discussing art acquisitions with women whose opinions actually mattered. "I need to wrap this up," I said, glancing at my watch. "I have appointments." "Mom, wait." His voice cracked. "I came because Jessica and I are having problems." There it was, the real reason for the frantic calls and sudden affection. Not remorse, not love. Need. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. But I didn't offer to fix a thing. He blinked as if I'd spoken a foreign language. "The divorce lawyer wants a $50,000 retainer." "My business is struggling. The kids' school fees are due next month." His words trailed off, heavy with expectation. But I simply folded my hands and waited, the city skyline gleaming behind me, a quiet reminder of just how much had changed. I nodded, sympathetic but silent. "Mom," Anthony said, his voice unsteady, "I know I haven't been the best son. I know Christmas was— We made mistakes, but I'm asking for your help. I'm family." Family. The very word he'd used to push me away was now the lifeline he tried to throw. "You are family," I agreed quietly. "You're also the one who told me not to come to Christmas because you wanted peace. The one who never once asked how I was during the 6 months since. And the one who only called when you realized I had something you needed." His face crumpled. For a moment he looked like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom. I was wrong. We were wrong. Jessica, she influenced me and I let her. I'm sorry. Jessica influenced you to treat your mother like an inconvenience. She said, You were trying to control us. To make us feel guilty. For what? For not needing you anymore. The honesty was brutal. Not needing me. As if I'd only ever been valuable for what I could provide. And once they'd outgrown that need, I became disposable. And now you need me again, I said. He nodded miserably. I know how it looks. I know I don't deserve your help after how I treated you, but I'm desperate, Mom. I don't know what else to do. I rose slowly, smoothing my skirt. I'll think about it. You'll think about it? I'll consider whether helping you is something I want to do, whether it's good for me, whether it fits my values, whether it's how I choose to spend my money. He stared at me like I was a stranger, and maybe to him I was. I'll be in touch, I said, walking him to the door. After he left, I stood at the window, looking down at the street below. Somewhere down there, Anthony was probably sitting in his car, trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand how the mother who once said, "Of course, honey, whatever you need," now said, "I'll think about it." The truth was, I had already decided. I just wasn't ready to tell him what that decision was. I let Anthony wait 2 full weeks before I called back. 2 weeks of constant ringing. First him, then Jessica, and finally Emma, my 17-year-old granddaughter. Her voice trembling as she said, "Daddy's so stressed. Mommy's crying all the time." They were pulling every emotional lever they'd ignored when they didn't want my company. When I finally invited Anthony over, I chose the timing carefully. A Saturday afternoon, just after I'd returned from a weekend in the Hamptons with Eleanor and her husband. I was still wearing the linen dress I'd bought for their yacht party, salt air in my hair, the quiet glow of someone who'd spent 2 days being treated like she mattered. Anthony looked worse than before. Jeans, a wrinkled shirt, hair too long, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Thank you for seeing me," he said as I led him to the living room. "I know you're busy." I was busy. Busier than I'd ever been, and loving every minute, but I didn't say that. "Sit down, Anthony. We need to talk." He perched on the edge of the sofa, nervous. I took the chair across from him, the same spot where I'd sat 2 weeks earlier when he first learned about my fortune. "Before we discuss what you need," I began, "I want you to understand something I've learned these past few months." He nodded eagerly, like a student hoping for a passing grade. "I spent 40 years making myself smaller so others could feel bigger. I worked jobs I hated so you could have opportunities. I stayed in cramped apartments so you could have college funds. I wore clothes that made me invisible so you could shine. Mom, I never asked you to—" "No," I said, holding up a hand. "You didn't ask. You simply expected. And I gave because I thought that's what love meant. Sacrifice without recognition, service without appreciation." He fell silent, pale. "Do you know what I've discovered since Christmas?" I continued. "When people see you as valuable, they treat you as valuable. When they know your time costs something, they don't waste it. When they understand that your attention is a gift, they're grateful for it." I leaned forward so he couldn't look away. "For the first time in my life, I'm surrounded by people who want my opinions, who value my experience, who invite me because they truly enjoy my company. Not because they have to, not because I'm paying for the privilege, but because they choose to." Anthony's hands clenched in his lap. "I choose you too, Mom. You're my mother." "No, Anthony," I said softly. "You didn't choose me. You inherited me." The words hung in the room, heavy and undeniable. I watched him absorb every word, saw the moment he realized I wasn't wrong. "I want to help you," I said at last, "but not the way I used to. Not by quietly fixing your problems and pretending it never happened. Not by making it easy for you to repeat the same mistakes because you knew I'd always clean up the mess." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I reached into my purse and placed a folder on the coffee table. Inside were neatly organized financial records, proof of a lifetime he'd never bothered to notice. "For 20 years, I continued, you've borrowed money from me. 50 here, 200 there. Larger amounts like the 5,000 for Emma's school fees. Do you know how much it adds up to?" He shook his head. $47,000, I said evenly. His mouth opened, but no sound came. I tracked every loan, every promise to pay me back. Because I thought someday you'd care enough to make it right. But you never asked. Because in your mind, it wasn't borrowing. It was just taking what you needed from someone you assumed would always say yes. Mom, I didn't think... You didn't think I was keeping track? Or you didn't think it mattered? He went silent for so long I wondered if he'd speak at all. Finally he whispered, "I didn't think you minded." "Of course I minded," I said softly. But I trained you to expect my sacrifice. You stopped seeing it as sacrifice. You saw it as my job. I gathered the papers back into the folder, each page a quiet testament to years of one-sided giving. So here's what will happen, I said. I'll pay the $50,000 retainer for your divorce lawyer. Relief flickered across his face. Mom, thank you. I promise I'll pay you back this time. No, I interrupted. You won't. Because this isn't a loan. He blinked. What is it? Severance pay, I said calmly. I'm buying myself out of the obligation to fix your problems. $50,000, and after that we're even. No more emergency calls, no more crisis management, no more assuming my money is your safety net. I don't understand. I'm retiring from being your financial backup plan. From now on, you handle your own life like the grown man you are. Panic replaced the relief on his face. But what if something happens? What if the kids need help? Or Jessica? Jessica has her mother for that, I replied. Patricia has been your family's ATM for years. I'm sure she'll continue. That's different, he protested. Patricia gives because she wants to. Exactly. She gives because you've made her feel valued. Because you never treated her generosity as an entitlement. The comparison hung heavy between us. But you're my mother. Yes, I said. And you're 38 years old. Being someone's child doesn't grant unlimited access to their resources. He sat there, struggling to process this new reality. The mother who had always said yes was now drawing boundaries he couldn't cross. There's something else, I added, about Christmas. His face went carefully blank. What about it? You told me not to come because you wanted a peaceful Christmas with family. But I was family too, Anthony. I was family until it was inconvenient. We made a mistake. I know that now. No, you made a choice. You chose Jessica's comfort over my feelings. You chose your kids' preferences over your mother's inclusion. You chose peace over loyalty. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know you are. But sorry doesn't erase the 6 months I spent wondering what I'd done wrong. Sorry doesn't change the message you sent, that I wasn't welcome in my own family. Tears welled in his eyes. Real tears, not the practice kind from childhood. What can I do to make this right? You can accept that this is how things are now, I said. I'm not the woman I was last Christmas. I don't beg for inclusion or settle for scraps of affection. I have choices, and I choose to live differently. His voice cracked. Does that mean you don't want me in your life? I studied the man I'd raised and loved for nearly 4 decades. In that moment, he looked impossibly young, uncertain of where he stood. I want you in my life if you truly want to be in mine, I said. Really in it. Not just when you need something. Call because you care how I'm doing. Invite me because you enjoy my company, not because you feel obligated. I do enjoy your company, he said quietly. Do you? When was the last time you called just to talk? When was the last time you asked about my friends, my plans, my hopes? He had no answer. I'm not angry anymore, Anthony, I said, rising and smoothing my dress. I'm simply done being taken for granted, done being treated like I'm lucky to be included instead of the other way around. I'll have my lawyer transfer the $50,000 this week, I told Anthony. After that, we start fresh. You decide what kind of relationship you want with me, and I'll decide if it's one I want too. He rose slowly, looking lost. Can I hug you? I let him. But the embrace felt different now, less desperate on my side, more grateful on his. I love you, Mom. I love you too, I said, holding his gaze. But love isn't enough anymore. I need respect as well. When the door closed behind him, I stood in my beautiful apartment, the city skyline glowing through the windows. For the first time since Christmas, I felt completely at peace. I was finally free. 6 months later, I was making morning coffee when the phone rang. Grandma Ann? I hope I'm not bothering you. It was Emma, my 19-year-old granddaughter. You're never a bother, sweetheart. How are you? I'm good, really good. I wanted to thank you. I paused, surprised. Emma had never called just to say thank you. Not for the birthday gifts, or the school clothes when money was tight, or the countless nights I'd babysat so her parents could have evenings out. Thank me for what? For the college fund. Dad told me you set one up for Jake and me. Nobody's ever done anything like that for me before. I smiled, remembering the afternoon I'd spent with my financial advisor, creating education trusts for both grandchildren, funds they could access for tuition and living expenses, untouchable by their parents, and offered with no strings attached. You're welcome, honey. I want you to have every opportunity. It's not just the money, she said softly. It's that you thought about my future. Mom's always focused on right now, and Dad's always stressed. But you planned ahead. That means a lot. Her insight caught me off guard. When had Emma become such a thoughtful young woman? Can I ask you something, Grandma? Of course. Are you happier now? The question surprised me. What do you mean? Dad says you're different since you moved to the penthouse. More independent. When I saw those pictures from your charity events, you looked happy, really happy. I don't remember you looking like that before. I considered my answer carefully. Emma was old enough for honesty. I am happier, I said. I'm living the life I want instead of the life other people expected me to live. Is that why you don't come to family dinners anymore? There it was, the question I'd been waiting for. I don't come because I'm not invited the right way anymore. The right way? For years I was invited to family events as the help, I explained. Come early to cook, stay late to clean, bring something homemade because your other grandmother would bring something expensive. I was included, but not truly welcome. Emma was quiet, processing. But that changed, I continued. I changed. I decided I'd rather spend holidays with people who genuinely want me there than with people who merely tolerate me. Her voice was small. Do you think we tolerated you? My heart softened. Not you, sweetheart. You were a child. You didn't have a choice in how adults treated one another. She took a breath. I'm calling because I want to see you. Not because Mom told me to. Not because it's a holiday. Because I miss you. That evening, Emma came to my apartment for dinner. Just the two of us. No complicated family dynamics. She told me about her classes, her friends, her plans after graduation. I shared stories about the foundation, my travels, the art classes I'd started. We talked for hours, the way I'd always hoped we could, but never had when every interaction was filtered through her parents. Grandma, can I say something kind of weird? She asked. Sure. I think you're cooler now than you've ever been. I laughed. Cooler? You have this confidence, like you know exactly who you are and you're not apologizing for it. When I was little, it seemed like you were always trying to make everyone else happy. Now you're trying to make yourself happy. Is that bad? Are you kidding? It's amazing. I want to be like that when I'm your age. When Emma left, she hugged me tighter than she had since she was a child. Can we do this again? Just us? Anytime you want, I said. 2 weeks later, Jake called. My younger grandson, 16, thoughtful in ways I hadn't expected. Grandma, he said, Dad says you might not come to Christmas again this year. That's right. Can I ask why? I explained it the same way I had to Emma, about the difference between being wanted and being merely tolerated. And as I spoke, I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't just free of old obligations. I was finally living a life that was entirely, unapologetically mine. Jake started coming over every other Saturday. We cooked together. My old holiday stuffing became his favorite, and I told him stories about his father as a child, about the grandfather he'd never met, about the family history no one else seemed interested in keeping alive. He was a good kid, simply caught in the middle of grown-up complications he hadn't created. The real surprise came in November. Anthony called, and for once it wasn't because he needed something. Mom, I wanted to talk to you about Christmas, he said. I braced myself for another plea, another attempt to pull me back into their version of family harmony. I know you're not coming to our house, and I understand why, he continued. But I was wondering, would you be okay if I came to see you? Just me on Christmas morning before the chaos starts. The request was so unexpected I stayed silent. I'm not asking for anything, he added quickly. I just want to spend time with my mother, if you'll have me. What about Jessica? I asked. Jessica and I are working on things. Part of that is learning how to maintain relationships that matter to me, whether or not they fit into her plan. It was the most mature thing I'd ever heard him say. I'd like that, I told him. Christmas morning, Anthony arrived at 10 with a thermos of coffee and a bag of pastries from my favorite bakery, the one I'd mentioned loving months earlier. He'd remembered. We sat in the living room watching the snow fall over the city and simply talked. He asked about the foundation, my travels, the art classes Emma had told him about. I asked about his business, his marriage, his hopes for the new year. I owe you an apology, he said as he stood to leave. Not just for Christmas last year, for all the years before that. for treating your generosity like a right, for taking your love for granted, for never seeing you as a person with dreams of your own. What change? I asked. Watching you live differently, he admitted. Seeing how happy you are when you're not carrying everyone else. I realized I'd never even wondered what would make you happy, and now I can see it. You're happier than I've ever seen you, and I'm proud of you for choosing yourself. After he left, I stood in my beautiful apartment, surrounded by the life I had built, and felt something I'd never felt before. Complete contentment. Messages filled my phone throughout the day. Emma sending photos from her volunteer shift at a homeless shelter. Jake showing off the dinner he'd cooked using one of my recipes. Margaret and Charles inviting me for champagne that evening. People who chose me because they wanted me there, not because they felt they had to. That night I stepped onto my balcony, the city lights glittering below, wrapped in a cashmere robe that cost more than I once spent on groceries in a month. I thought about the woman I'd been a year earlier, the one who accepted exclusion as the price of peace, who made herself small so others could feel big. She was gone now. In her place stood someone who knew her own worth, someone who understood the difference between being loved and being used, someone who had learned that the best relationships are chosen, not inherited. My phone rang again. Eleanor calling from her vacation home in Aspen. "Anne, darling, I hope you had a wonderful Christmas. The foundation board voted yesterday. We'd like you to chair the education committee next year." "Chair the committee?" I echoed, stunned. "Yes, you," she said warmly. "You have the vision. We need your leadership." "I'd be honored," I replied. "Wonderful. And Richard and I are hosting a small dinner when we return, just 8 or 10 people. You simply must come." After we hung up, I poured a glass of wine and raised it to the quiet room. "To new beginnings," I said aloud. Somewhere in the city below, my family was learning to miss me properly, learning to value what I offered instead of taking it for granted, learning that love without respect isn't love at all. I had given them the greatest gift I could, the chance to choose me freely, without obligation or guilt. Some were rising to the occasion, others were not. And for the first time in my life, that was their choice to make, not mine. I was at last completely and beautifully free. Now I'm curious about you, the listener. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever faced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments. And while you're here, check out the 2 other stories on screen. Both are channel favorites, and they just might surprise you. Thank you for staying with me to the end.